Welcome to Beyond Names. I am Dr. Habib. This is a space for spiritual seekers, soulful misfits, for the curious and the committed, for those grounded in a tradition, and for those who are not yet sure what they believe. Whether you call the divine God, Yahweh, Allah, Elohim, Hashem, Brahman, Great Spirit, higher power, or you're still searching for language that fits, you are welcome here. Together, we'll explore the intersection of spirituality and daily life, the wisdom of many traditions, and the ways we return to our true selves, to our source, to the light that each of us carry within. I'm so glad you're here. Let's begin with introduction of our conversation partner for this episode, Susannah Crolius. Susannah is an artist, writer, workshop and retreat facilitator, spiritual companion, grief tender, and a certified spiritual literacy facilitator. Susannah is artist in residence and director of belonging at In Along the Way. And to learn more about Susannah and her work, please visit artandsoulwm.org. Susannah, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Habib, thanks for having me. I feel like there's some sort of circle coming back after a few years of uh I worked so intensively with you during the spiritual literacy program, and then it's been a few years, and now it's a wonderful circling back into connection.
Yes, it's wonderful to reconnect. So thank you so much for saying yes. And if you would please introduce yourselves to our listeners by way of sharing your spiritual story.
Mm. I love it when people say, "Oh, share your spiritual story," as if you can do it in with like three bullet points. Last night I sat down because I had not reviewed my spiritual story in a while. I sat down last night and, bullet point after bullet. I mean, there's pages. So my spiritual story. Um,
It,
how long do
it,
you have?
well, you honestly, you can take as much time as you want.
Okay, well, I'll touch on some of the bullet points. Um, I didn't grow up religiously or spiritually in any way. I grew up in a family where the arts were part of our lives. My mother played the flute, and my father wrote, and my mother painted, and we did community theater. And
Mm,
they were also very much nature lovers. So my mother
mhm,
would garden, that was her passion. We'd go camping. So I was thinking last night that even though we didn't grow up with anything called religion or even
mm,
spirituality,
mm,
what was clear was that there was a sense of sacredness. I wouldn't have used that language at the time, but there was something um, about being connected to a larger web, I think.
mhm.
Um, and when I was 8, because our family spent so much time near the ocean, I was sure I was going to be a marine biologist. And sort of, maybe it's a regret. I don't know. I sort of wish maybe I had, but now I live by the ocean, and so I can at least appreciate it. And I also grew up in a family where authenticity and wholeness
Mm,
and were not welcomed. And there was a lot of shame in my family. And I have to say that shame and spirituality, my spiritual story, um, there's a thread there. I think of William Stafford's poem about the thread. Do you know
mm,
that poem where he
mm,
says, I've got it right here. He says, there's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder what you're pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it's hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you can do can stop time's unfolding. Don't ever let go of the thread. some William Stafford, poet William Stafford. And I think
Mm.
about the thread. I think for a long time, shame was a thread in my spiritual story. And I would really say that my spiritual story has been um, an exploration and a pushing against and a resistance to um, moving out of shame.
Mm.
So this idea of what I call home, what feels safe,
Mhm.
what feels true, what feels authentic, has been, as I looked back on this list, I really think that that's been the spiritual path, and it's taken many different forms. But I think that this search for, or this hope for, um, uh, being unbound
Mm.
is what I've searched for. So um, I uh, I think I connected spiritually again without it being spiritual or without it being named when I took a hospice volunteer training
Mm.
in the 80s in Colorado where I was living. And it was just as the hospice movement was taking root in
Mhm.
um, this country. And I can't tell you what it was about death and dying and volunteering to be a part of that movement and being part of dying people, but it stirred something in me deep, like at the deepest story. And maybe it was my first experience of thinking about dying. I don't know, I was in my 20s, but I think it was maybe my first encounter with this sense of the life cycle, and that question of what do you do with your life? And then to explore that, I started to go to Unitarian Universalist
Mm.
group of people because I knew, having grown up in the 70s, that I knew what I didn't believe, but I didn't know what I believed, and didn't want to go to a Christian church, but went to a Unitarian Universalist group of people who taught me many things. They taught me about the freedom to have language, for what is divine, what is sacred. They taught me about community, what it means to be community.
Mhm.
They taught me about, there was a woman minister there, and it was the first time I'd ever seen a woman really in a place of power.
Mhm.
And that was quite revealing to me. Um, and continued exploring all the questions through the Unitarian Universalist tradition, and then had a mystical experience of I can only say God. I'll use the word God. Um, Telling me to go to seminary. And I mean, I was very new to religious life and institutional life, and me in seminary. I was supposed to be thinking about going to veterinary school. Um, but um, it would be the first time of many times when my soul is spoken and I've had to pay attention and decide uh, that it would be a leap of faith.
Mm.
And so I went to Unitarian Universalist Seminary in Berkeley, California, not at all. I remember just thinking, what the heck am I doing here? And I thought, well, maybe I'll do more as a hospice chaplain, or maybe I'll explore death and dying more. Maybe I will be a poet. I
Mhm.
That's what I hoped the invitation of seminary was. And um, being in a Unitarian Universalist seminary is a different experience than uh, other kinds of seminary. There was a fluidity, a freedom, a sense of encouraging your own sense of critical thinking and forming your own opinions that was challenging for me. I really have to say it was challenging for
Mm.
me to be given that permission to do that because I was so um, still so shame-filled and just sort of
Mm.
not clear on that I had a voice, that I had any voice that could speak of. But then I had an experience in world religions class. And it was the first day of Christianity, the Christianity and world religions class. And the teacher started the class by playing some Gregorian chant.
Mm,
And I started to uncontrollably weep.
mm,
I could, in something that was touching me so, so deeply. I had never felt it. It scared me. It scared me.
yeah.
And uh, I went to my advisor and I said, something's wrong. I'm moved by Christianity, or I think there's something really wrong. I think, and she wisely said, pay attention, follow this. Here's the number of a spiritual director who's an 80-year-old nun who is who's just a blast. And here's the uh, address of the United Church of Christ Church down the street. And she said, I invite you to just be open to this. Um, and I did. And you know, a long story short, I ended up being ordained in the United Church of Christ and uh, going into institutional ministry, parish ministry,
Mm,
after I graduated, um, and then did my work in the church was as an intentional interim minister, meaning you go into congregations for a shorter period of time and work with them through any number of challenges, whether it's the death of a pastor or whether it's clergy sexual misconduct, whether it's grief, whether it's just shifting times. And I did that for a long time.
mm,
And um, but it always felt, I have to say, was that my spiritual life? It was my professional life.
mm,
Was it my spiritual life? Being a pastor is an incredible gift. You are welcomed into people's lives in their deepest stories. Um, and I wasn't interested in keeping an institution alive.
mm,
It really sort of hit me later, um, 25 years later, that what I was doing was maintaining a tradition and an institution, and that wasn't, in fact, spiritually feeding me, wasn't spiritually feeding me. It was, I was doing my calling.
mhm,
I was faithful to the calling. I was faithful to the ordination vows.
mhm,
But, 15 years or so ago, I just thought I had this moment of standing up at the pulpit in a big church that's supposed to seat 800 people, and there were maybe 60 in the pews. And I remember
mm,
looking out and just thinking, I, I just want to be sitting around in a circle sharing stories. I don't want to be up here in a robe,
mm,
pontificating, preaching preaching as if I had some deeper wisdom, as if I had some knowledge other than my MDiv training. And I thought I this is this is not my spiritual life.
mm,
It's a form of it. It's a professional form of it,
yeah.
but I can't do this anymore in
Mm,
this way.
yeah.
Um, and so I took a leap of faith. I got a grant, a $10,000 grant to explore regenerative ministry options. And I tried to remember when I had felt the most alive, and in the flow and the vibrancy of life. And it was when I was doing art. I was a dancer,
Mm,
um, and had trained as a ballet dancer quite seriously. And I remember those were times of the training were the times when I was most attuned to my body, myself, and something larger than me. And so I thought, well, where do the arts fit into this? I didn't know. I'd stopped dancing by then.
Mm.
And uh took this grant, got this grant, and decided I was going to explore the relationship between arts and spirituality, which seems funny, Habib, right now, because I wasn't practicing the arts. I
Mm.
was not an artistic practitioner. I was living in the memory of them as a
Yeah.
child and how they made me feel. And
Yeah.
there were some other people who I really appreciated their explorations with art and spirituality. Jan Richardson being one of them, who's a painter and a Methodist minister, and then Christine Walters Paintner was just coming into the scene with her Abbey of the Arts and exploring the arts and
Mhm.
spirituality, and uh, I thought I would just take a leap and do that, and so for I formed something called Art and Soul,
Mhm.
and it had been and was until I retired it a complete experiment in how um, the creative process is in fact for me and for other people experience as a gateway into the sacred.
Mm.
And in that time since I left uh, church, I began to figure out how I needed to reconnect with my holy stories. I had lost it after 25 years of being in the ministry. I wasn't in touch with my body. I wasn't in touch with my soul. I wasn't in touch with my heart. I had no stories that I could pull up. It was almost a trauma response, really. And
Mm.
uh, I started to collect items, found objects, things that just moved me. I'd walk through an antique store or flea market or take a walk in the woods, and I'd say, "Oh, that acorn is just so beautiful." And so I began to collect these things and
Mhm.
thought, well, how, what does this mean? And it was at that time that I sort of came to understand the power of metaphor and symbol.
Mm.
And these objects began to take on sort of metaphorical and symbolic meanings in this time of transition. And and I began to put together found object altars,
Mm.
um, and a lot of them in old clock cases. And they were places, an altar is a place where things are laid down, released, and made recognized as holy. And so these objects that had had stories long before me were restoried through my art making of altars to
Mm.
help me find my own deepest stories.
Mm.
Um, and and I eventually left denominational identity after I left church as institution. I left denominational identity and spent really the last 13 years doing art and soul as a virtual and in-person community in fluid ways of exploring spirituality and creativity. So just to bring you up to the present, um, I, I think of the spiritual life as movement, ebb and flow, ebb and flow. It is the realization that we are always in movement. We are always engaged in the movement of what is happening within us and around us. And 2 years ago, my 24-year relationship ended. And I was in a position of sort of saying, what now, what? And so
Mm.
just to bring you up to present, I am, I decided, I didn't decide, my soul, this was one of these other sort of intuitive things. Um, I wanted to be by the ocean. I needed to be by the ocean. And so I moved to Mid-Coast, Maine 9 months ago.
Mm,
Um, and am being a full-time artist now and spiritual director and grief tender, and doing it. Part of my work is as artist in residence at In Along the Way, which is a way to revision how we grow older together,
mm,
independently, interdependently. But so that's all to say I've embarked on this new chapter 9 months ago. I mean, I moved here in April and I'm still figuring out this new movement of my life. What does it, what spiritually, what does it mean? I really came here. I moved to Maine, dedicated myself to be an artist because that's what my soul encouraged me to do. It said, this is what you need to do. This is how you'll live your most vibrant life in light of, in light of the fact that I was getting older. And so I'm
mm,
still figuring it out. I'm still figuring out spiritually what this move has been about. I do know that I came in search of wonder and delight,
mm,
and that is now my spiritual practice. I look for wonder and delight, and yeah, I'll just leave it at that. It's everywhere, even in these hard times. Even in these hard
mm,
times,
yeah. Mm,
wonder and delight are not only practices, but they're truths. They're spiritual truths.
yeah. Yeah. Mm. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. There's many different ways this conversation could go, but I'm interested in this question that you posed around. You didn't ask it specifically, but you did in reference to the your religious life,
Yeah.
your professional life in organized religion. If I'm not sure that's completely the correct language, but then you asked, how is this what I'm doing professionally in response to my calling, feeding me spiritually? Uh, and you came to the decision that it wasn't really, if I understood you correctly. So
Yeah.
I'm curious. When you mentioned the ebb and flow, um, have you honed down to what you define spirituality as at this point in your life? Can you say that for me, spirituality is,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
Um, I think spirituality is the living practice of paradox
mm,
between being fluent, open, fluent, um, and tethered. And I use those words intentionally. Um, how do we open and open and open in trust? And how do we choose what we will tether our energy and time and love to and with? Um, if I had to choose one word to describe spirituality, I would use belovedness.
mm, beautiful.
Um, the search for understanding myself and others as beloved,
Mm,
um, and then the claiming of that and the permission giving to be that. Um, so yeah, I would throw out the words beloved, fluent, and tethered to encompass for me what spirituality is about. And I also would add that I think that there's I think spirituality in the words of ebb and flow have to do with also understanding that we're caught in movement all the time.
Hmm.
Um, and how do we practice not being knocked off our feet? How do we, I won't even use the word embrace because that feels impossible a lot, but
Hmm.
um, how do we live in the understanding that we are always within ourselves in relationship to one another, to the universe? We're always in movement. Um, and what is the thing that abides in the midst of the movement? And that's, I would say that that's, I use the word the soul. The soul is the inner part of us that is like the thread that William Stafford spoke about, the thing that sort of is the thing that calls me back into aliveness and possibility.
Hmm. When you sit with, in the present day,
Mm.
your belovedness,
Mm. Yes. Yes.
do you
Mm.
do you feel like you've got it in your bones, in the marrow, or do you feel like, oh,
Yes.
yes? Oh,
Yes.
beautiful.
Yes. So when you talk about spiritual journey, like what I didn't talk about was sort of the way that I unbound myself from shame. Um, and shame is no longer a part of my language or my feeling. And it was only when I was really able to wrestle with, when I really I had to get rid of it. I had to find a way to not have it paralyze me. And that was a long process. Part of leaving church was that um it's an environment where you're always feeling like you're not doing enough and you're always it's sort of and so when I left church, that sort of began to help me come back to myself in small ways. And then the practice of art, which is a lot of failure and a lot of trying and a lot of experimenting, and to just say, what I just wonder what's going to emerge instead of saying, oh, it has to be this way. So, so I am so happy. It makes me very, it makes me teary and happy to say when you use the word beloved, when you ask about my belovedness, I can feel it and I can know it. And um, uh, and what do I say? I can feel it and I can know it, and I can live from it.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we Sufis would say Alhamdulillah, which is means praise be.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes, a
yeah.
thousand times.
Mm, yeah. I'm so happy to hear it and see it and witness it, and you are transmitting it.
Oh, good. Well, good,
You are
good.
transmitting that knowledge and the delight that you are experiencing in your belovedness. Yeah. What a beautiful gift to share.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think of all the ways that we as humans bind ourselves from childhood, from culture, from religion, from we're so bound. And I think that I really think that the spiritual work is is a lot of it is about unbinding
Mm,
and stepping into trust.
yeah. Yeah. In my tradition, we say that our innate disposition our natural disposition is purity,
Mm,
is pure light, like that who we are in our essence is pure light.
mm,
And so when you talk about knowing your belovedness in this movement from shame
mm.
and the pervasiveness of the experience of shame, for this in this yearning for unbounded freedom and settling into this place of knowing your belovedness. To me, that sounds like a an awareness in your growth of return to your true self.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I started by the circle of us reconnecting, but again, I mean, I think that if we think movement, a circle is a movement. It's sort of an ongoing movement, and I do think that um uh that those old childhood stories, which were such a part of my life, they've been integrated now, um, and it's all part of that circle. And I think to be able to just I'll just say that to be able to know my belovedness is I can die happy. I can,
Oh,
just that's what I had sought and wandered and sought so much for. And here it is. Here it is.
mm,
So, and not every day. It's not like I'm in bliss every day, but it is just this calm. The word I use is ease. I am
mm,
at ease. I trust myself. I trust my God. I trust. Um, I, I always thought the word faith and trust were interchangeable for me. Just faith and trust. Trust in what? Trust in whom? Trust in, and there is a cycle of being and a movement of being that is part of the human experience. And if I can just be in that fluidity of that, and I include death in that. I think I shared with you, I'll tell you a story about being invited into the idea of death as part of that movement, that happened recently. I I got, of all things, West Nile virus. Now, normally people who get West Nile virus, they don't even know it, or they just have some flu-like symptoms. Well, my body experienced it uh, in a very violent way, and I almost died 2 months ago. I almost died. I was in the hospital for a long time. My body was paralyzed. My organs were shutting down,
mm,
and uh and when the doctors said they were quite sure I was not going to make it through this, because they didn't know what it was initially. They thought it might have been a tick-borne illness, but when that didn't happen, they didn't know what it was. And so um, I've had to really wrestle with what it means now to live in that circle, that movement that definitely includes death, definitely includes death, as part of it all. And what is lost, I'm still my body is still recovering. I don't have a lot of leg strength. I had to learn to walk again.
mm,
I lost use of my right hand, which is my art hand, but it's all
mm,
coming back now. It's coming back. But to understand that it isn't all bliss, that this grief and sorrow it's all mixed in to this thing called the spiritual life and the human life. And um, I find that I can feel more at ease in the recognition that death and loss, grief are all part of it. It's not separate, that it's it's all part of this flow.
Mm. And it's all part of what moves us forward.
Mm.
You
Say more
know,
about that.
well, you talked about the movement being the constant,
Mm,
and it's whether we're looking at the heart as a physical organ in the process of pumping, blood is pumped through our system through the process of constriction and expansion.
mm,
And all of life is this movement of constriction and expansion. And when we
mm,
are in the flow of the universal energy of constriction and expansion, you know, then we are joined in our state of inner being and our state of interconnectedness, and we flow without resistance.
mm. With
Yeah,
ease.
with ease, with
Mm,
ease.
mm,
And we're human. We have emotions, we have sensations, and sometimes we resist. But it is that constriction and expansion that creates the movement that keeps us moving on our journeys. We return to our true selves through the process of constriction and expansion.
Do you think we need to be aware of that or open to that, or does it happen no matter what?
I, my inclination is to say it's both.
Mm,
When I think about spirituality and I think about the spiritual journey, I think that there's a process that part of that process is a passive receiving.
mm,
That part of life in general is a universal mercy, even when we're
mm,
not aware of it. Right? And part of that is our conscious intention, our conscious participation. And I think that are at play in our journeys.
mm, mm.
Would you like to say, well, you shared before we started recording, that you had a near-death experience as part of your
Oh,
journey with West Nile.
I did.
And would you feel okay about telling us a little bit about that? And
Sure, sure. Um, it was so yeah. Um, I had collapsed because my kidneys were shutting down and my fever was very high, and I was alone in my studio here in Maine. And in that time, it was many hours before somebody found me. But I heard horse horses' hooves
mm,
coming towards me. And horses have always been a powerful animal for me. I think in the last 13 years, as I've sort of my opened up into my belovedness, the horse keeps reappearing, both metaphorically and actually. Um, and so in this experience, as I heard horse hooves galloping towards me,
mm,
and I knew right away what it was. I knew
mm,
right away what those hooves meant. And I was sitting on a fence in a field, and I remember thinking, I guess I better say goodbye. I guess I better start saying goodbye. So I started to do this whole litany of goodbye to friends. I can
mm,
remember just saying one at a time, just sort of saying goodbye. Thank you for, and the horse got closer and closer. And then it stopped at the fence and it was sort of snorting and saying, are you gonna, I mean, it wasn't saying, but I knew I had to get on it.
mm.
Um, and I knew I was dying. I don't know how to tell that. That I just
Yeah.
knew that I remember just thinking my time has come. I didn't really think I'd die this way on the floor in my studio, but okay, I guess the time has come, and I was very at peace with it. It was not scary. It
Mm,
wasn't um
mm,
it was just this sort of matter of fact sense like, oh, this is how it's going to end. This is how this part of my energy, my life is going to end. And I don't know. I did not get on the horse. Clearly, I did not. I don't remember. I just remember doing this litany of goodbyes and really unbinding. I really think I can feel it in my body. How just saying, well, goodbye, Teresa. Goodbye, Linda. Goodbye, Shivani.
mhm,
Goodbye, Victoria. Sort of all their love and their care for me just sort of, it felt like they just sort of rushed around and sort of hovered around me. So anyway, um it was a very important experience, and I don't have any answers about it, and I've been thinking
mm,
about it, and I've been thinking about what it means to me spiritually now. I've
mm,
worked a lot around death and dying in my professional career, and what does it mean to have been confronted with uh, the reality of death in this way. I don't know. I don't know yet. I'm
mm,
still working. I mean, it was very recent, and so I'm still writing about it and making art about it and reflecting on it.
mm, mm. Uh, a couple things that come up for me is horses have also had a very special place in my life. When I was a child, in a home environment that was very challenging,
Mm,
the to be at the stable with the horse was my
mm,
safe place.
mm,
And there was this horse, and God put an angelic presence in that horse.
mm,
That horse was for me an angel.
mm.
Yeah.
I believe it.
And then I also share there was a point in my life where uh, I had a, one of the doctors that I was seeing at the time was telling me, your organs are barely functioning. Another uh, practitioner, actually a medical doctor, but also a spiritual healer, said, "Yeah, your life cord is separating."
Mm,
And every night I was dreaming in some degree about dying.
mm,
Uh, and I was having trouble with falling.
mm,
And in the dreams, it was like this process of getting to the point of accepting the fall.
mm,
And
mm,
and so there was a dream where I was on the side of a cliff and I fell, and I just got to the place of being at peace with it, and just being like accepting I'm falling, and that's okay. And then I was caught by angels.
mm, mm, mm. What did that, do you remember what what that felt like, or do you remember what was going through your, what was that experience like to be caught by angels, and how has that impacted you in your own sense of spirituality?
Well, there there was like a dual reality. There was a part of me that was very much at peace with letting go of life on Earth.
Mm,
And there was a part of me that woke up from that and said, "Oh, I woke up from that."
It's kind of like,
My
damn, now what?
exactly. My soul has been returned to this body. So now what?
Yeah.
And so for me, that moment was a moment of, am I ready to meet my Lord?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm,
And I felt that I was not.
mm,
I have had many struggles as part of my spiritual journey with, old traumas and dysfunctional patterns and responses to those traumas, um, chronic health stuff, and sometimes I respond to my health challenges with grace and peace, and sometimes I respond to them with a lack of grace and a lack of peace. And I thought, when I meet my Lord, I want to have let go of every barrier.
mm,
I want to have let go of the places of anger and resistance and resentment. And I want to be, I want to be a heart of only love.
mm,
And so that motivated me to do some things that I hadn't done
mm,
in terms of my spiritual journey. It motivated me to study with a teacher that I've been thinking about studying with and hadn't yet. It motivated me to do a 40-day retreat. It motivated me to go on pilgrimage.
mm,
Uh, and and I somehow thought that I wasn't going to live through all of that.
mm.
And yet at the
Here
end,
you
after
here you are.
and yes, here I am. And at the end of that, after the pilgrimage, it was like waking up from that dream and saying, yes, I'm still here. Here I am. And so it's been a movement of constriction and expansion and a movement of spiritual motivation and spiritual lack of motivation.
I think the two go hand in hand. I don't think you can have one without the other. Let me ask you, where where are you in your sense of belovedness?
Oh, I'm gonna tell you true. Um, I've kind of been going through a dark night of the soul lately.
Mm,
Yeah, I mean, there have been points in my life where I have certainty in my belovedness.
mm, mm,
And and it's a journey. It is a process. It is not a matter of arrival.
right, right.
And um and one of the things that I've been dealing with lately is realizing that there is both a part of me that has that certainty of my belovedness, and there is a part of me that knows God's responsiveness and God's love. And there's a part of me that is still carrying very early childhood trauma and releasing misconceptions about God and struggling with misconceptions about God from trauma at a very young age. And and I will say that I have come a tremendous amount. Yeah, I've come a long ways. And yet it where I am now is saying, okay, how do I in this moment tend to those places of woundedness where I have experienced so much healing and so much transformation, and clearly there is yet more healing and yet more transformation. So where I am in sort of my belovedness now is grappling, for lack of a better word, with figuring out that to be beloved today means to bring together swaddling my toddler and giving that little 2-year-old, 3-year-old so traumatized, you know, love and care, and bringing that together with the adult, the the man, the adult man, and accepting what it is to be an adult, accepting what it is to have free will as an adult, accepting that how I use my free will has consequences. I can use my free will to do things that feed my heart and are ultimately in service of my soul, or I can use my free will in ways that cause rust over my heart and are not in service to my soul. And so bringing together that sort of adult responsibility and adult accountability with this part of me that has not grown up, this part of me that's very, very wounded, but in a way that's loving. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Those old stories really tether us. I think of the word tether again, and I think of tethering as you talked about it in a generative way. What will I give my heart and my love and my energy and my soul to, um, and commit to that. And the tethering of the old stories that just don't go away. They don't go away. And um, they might shift, or they might not be forefront at some point, but again, ebb and flow, they always come back. And I think that what do I want to say, that I wonder, in William Stafford's poem about the thread and the pulling of the stories of the old stories are a thread that are always pulled through our lives, and yet I wonder if it's God on the other end sort of pulling pulling them through us, you
Yeah.
know,
Mm,
that that and uh yeah, where does who's holding the thread that is
yeah.
pulling us and our our stories, whether they're generative or filled with shame or trauma. Um, and where do they go? Are they pulled into the hand of God, into the heart of God?
Mm,
That's a metaphor and an image that I could really work with. You talked about being the adult who sort of picks up the toddler and
yeah.
and comforts, not just comforts, but tends in the best sense of the way, tend, not just there, but I see you, I hear you, that this is really scary and painful and awful. Um, and and the image of being held,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the adult Habib, it's very interesting. There's a part of me there that remembers the child of love and light and just exuberant joy, like light that just explodes out. Like part of me remembers that child. Right. And the adult Habib also has done enough, that's not the right language, has received again and again and again knowledge of God's proximity, knowledge of God's responsiveness. I mean, I feel God's responsiveness, I don't know how many times a day. I mean, right?
Yes. Yes.
So the adult Habib needs to hold the little traumatized toddler with the knowledge of the belovedness.
Mm.
Because the real care is what returns us to truth.
Yeah.
And that little toddler that was traumatized is operating in falsehood.
Yes. 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 I call them the old stories. Yeah.
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 So part of caring for the toddler is giving the toddler love, and part of caring for the toddler is holding the pole of truth, of God is loving, God is merciful, God has always held you in hands of mercy and love.
We just forget. It's so funny how we forget if 5 minutes or an hour or a week, we forget. And so maybe spirituality is the practice of remembering that,
Yes, yes,
of
absolutely.
remembering that we
Yeah,
are always held.
yes. And I believe that we were made to return home, and that what we experience is for the purpose of returning us home.
Mm. Being at home, returning back to home in closer proximity to God. Is that what you mean by
You
being
could use
going?
metaphorical language to say in the
Okay.
arms of God, but I
Yeah.
would, in Sufism, we have these ontological categories, these realms of reality. There's and in the at one end of the spectrum, we have the world, the material world that we live in. But as you move to, the realm of the unseen, to the most subtle realm, this realm is the realm of oneness. It's the realm of unity. It's the realm of no separation.
Mm.
And and we human beings, I said this in a conversation the other day, we carry both the multiplicity of the earth and the
Mm.
oneness of the highest heaven.
Mm.
And we were made to return to that oneness.
Mm. It's a lot to carry, both those things. It's a lot
It
to
is.
carry.
It is a lot to carry.
Yeah. Yeah.
It absolutely is. And some very unique human beings are able to arrive at that spiritual station of the unity in return to being in the world, carrying that station of unity.
Do you think some people arrive, so to speak?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
So, and some people just have little tastes.
Hmm.
And those tastes keep us going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, it's been a wonderful conversation. Any final words of wisdom? I, in my mind, I thought we were going to talk about the intersection of spirituality and creativity, and that was only a small part of this conversation.
Have me back again and we can talk about that. But, I mean, isn't spirituality, we've talked about movement and spirituality, and isn't creativity just the movement of the spirit in us, whether it's painting or making altars or cooking or gardening? It's again, I think of creativity and art as movement of the spirit, movement of the soul.
Mm,
So there you
yeah.
have it.
In 20 words or less.
Yes.
Uh, well, thank you so much, Susanna, for the great
Thank you, Habib.
conversation.
Thank you for
Yeah.
having me. It's yeah, I feel full. I feel um w- delighted and wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you to all listeners for joining us on Beyond Names. Before we go, briefly, if you would just pause for one breath and reflect for a moment on what stays with you from this conversation with Susanna. May something you heard today help you reconnect with the light in your own heart. May it help you grow in compassion, clarity, and courage. May you find your way again and again back home to yourself, back home to the divine, however you name it. If today's conversation spoke to you, please like, share, and comment on this episode, and please follow or subscribe to Beyond Names. To make an appointment with me, please visit habibboerger.com. Until next time, may you be light. May you consciously participate in growing your light, and may you share your light. Peace be with you.